I didn't want to make this video. But because everybody is jumping on the bandwagon of dumping on the Rings of Power TV show, and don't get me wrong, it deserves to be dumped on. It's a trash show. It's a crap show. It deserves to be ripped apart. The reason I want to make this video is because everybody is comparing the Rings of Power to the Lord of the Rings books as though it is, as if it's the greatest fantasy novel ever written. And the travesty that is the Rings of Power TV show is an affront to Tolkien, who is the greatest fantasy author of all time. Here's why I want to make this video, is that there's two problems with that. One, The Lord of the Rings is not the greatest fantasy novel of all time. And two, Tolkien is not the greatest fantasy author of all time. You see, when it comes to a fantasy novel, a key element to a great fantasy novel is the application and use of magic and how well it's integrated and used within the world building. When it comes to the Lord of the Rings books, magic has no rhyme, no reason, and no rules. That is the opposite of what makes a fantasy novel great. That is the opposite of what makes a well-written fantasy novel. But here's the kicker. It's not just that magic has no rhyme, reason, or rules, but that was Tolkien's intention. Tolkien did that on purpose. Tolkien doesn't want magic to have any rhyme or reason or rules because that will hinder him from telling the story he wants to tell. Tolkien is a fantasy author that considers the magical aspects of the fantasy genre an inconvenience and annoyance to him being able to tell the story he wants. But somehow, a fantasy author who doesn't have any interest in magic is somehow considered the greatest fantasy author of all time. Here's a prime example of how Tolkien doesn't like how magic gets in the way of telling the story he wants to tell. Why is it that no one in Middle-earth can use magic to fly? When Saruman traps Gandalf, I can't remember the name of the tower. I suck at these names. But when Saruman traps Gandalf on the top of the tower, why doesn't Gandalf just use his magic to fly down? Why not use his magic to, I don't know, levitate or you know what, cast a feather fall spell for those of you who know what that is. Why not just do that? Instead, he has to wait, 1 or 2 months until an eagle comes to rescue him? Why? Why can't he just use his magic to fly down with the Balrog? Okay. The scenario involving Durin's Bane is such a rabbit hole of ridiculousness, but I'm just going to try and deal with one at a time. When Gandalf shatters the bridge and the Balrog falls down and Gandalf falls down with him, why doesn't Gandalf just use his magic to fly back up and go rejoin the Fellowship on their way to Mordor? Now, in regards to Gandalf falling, you could go, oh, well, he was panicking and that's why it didn't work. I will explain how that won't work in a bit, but in regards to Gandalf on the top of the tower, I'll just say 2 months. You know what? I'll be generous. I'll just say he was on the tower for 1 month. During the entire time he was on the tower, It never once occurred to him to use his magic to be able to fly and get off the tower. Now, if it had been established that Saruman had some type of barrier to prevent Gandalf from being able to get off the tower, that would have been fine. Except that's not what happened, because the eagle shows up and grabs him. So there's obviously no barrier stopping Gandalf from being able to just get off the tower using his magic. And just in case there are those of you who are going, well, maybe he didn't do it because there were orcs everywhere, then that means Gandalf would just have to wait until daylight hours to do it, because orcs hate sunlight. So either he's an idiot and he was stuck there for over a month and it never occurred to him to use his magic to fly off the tower, or there's no actual, or you can't actually use magic to fly. Now, I'll buy that. You can't use magic to fly. But if you want me to buy that, Tolkien, you better give me an explanation or a reason why. Tolkien doesn't have one, because that's not the reason Gandalf is stuck on the top of the tower for a month or over a month. The reason Gandalf is stuck on top of the tower for over a month is because Tolkien goes, that's what's happening. I want Gandalf stuck on that tower for over a month. And I'm not going to give any explanation or any reason why he can't get off. There's no reason that Gandalf cannot get off that tower. And Tolkien does not provide any reason why Gandalf cannot get off that tower. It's Tolkien going, I don't care how magic works. I don't care the magical abilities of what Gandalf has. I want him on that tower. He's staying on that tower. This is how Tolkien treats magic. He applies it when he wants, and he ignores it when it's inconvenient to be able to tell the story he wants to tell. And he ignores it without any explanation, without any rhyme or any reason. This is the greatest fantasy author of all time. Here's another major issue in regards to magic in The Lord of the Rings. It's impossible to explain. It's impossible to explain. It's impossible to establish. As an example, I love this. Gandalf uses 6 different types of magic. He does. He uses 6 different types of magic. Why does he need 6 different types of magic? Now, what are the different types of magic, you might be asking? I will explain. I will list the 6 different types of magic Gandalf uses. The first one is his Maya ability. When he becomes Gandalf the White, goes to Saruman and says, Saruman, your staff is broken. And boom, Saruman's staff is broken. That's Gandalf using his innate Maya magic to be able to have that happen. That's one. He can also cast spells, because when he's in the Mines of Moria with the Balrog, he casts a shutting spell on the door. So he has spells. But he also has words of command, because when he's on the mountaintop, actually, he has 2 types of words of command. He has one type of word of command that requires a staff, and a second type of word of command that doesn't require a staff. Because when he's on the mountain and they can't, and the companions can't start a fire, Gandalf says a word of command, says what he says, shoves the staff in the wood, and it lights up. But when he's fighting the wargs, he says a word of command and the trees go on fire. He doesn't need a staff for that. So He has his Maya ability. He has his Maya magic. He has spell magic. He has a word of power magic that requires his staff. A word of command magic that doesn't require his staff. Then he on the bridge, in the Mines of Moria, on the bridge, when he destroys the bridge, he does it. What he does is he takes his staff, smotes the bridge. The staff lights up, breaks, and the bridge shatters. He doesn't use his Maya magic because he doesn't go, "You shall not pass," and then that's what happens. No. He says, "You cannot pass." And then after that, he then, right, hits the bridge with his staff. So now he has a fifth type of magic where he can just use his staff independently to do magic. Okay, sure, no problem, whatever. And not only that, why does the staff break? Like, why would, anyway, I'll get to that. But here's the sixth type of magic, and I have to read it out loud. And I'm going to quote it, and it's during the battle of the wargs. Stooping like a cloud, he lifted a burning branch and strode to meet the wolves. They gave back before him. High in the air, he tossed the blazing brand. It flared with a sudden white radiance like lightning. Okay, hold now. And his voice rolled like thunder. He then says the words of command, and there was a roar and a crackle, and the tree above him burst into a leaf and bloom of blinding flame. Now, the word of power the word of command that he used was to set the tree on fire. How did the blazing brand suddenly burst into white radiance like lightning? He doesn't use his Maya ability to cause the flaming brand to burst into radiance. How did the burning branch flare into radiance? Because it just did. Because it just did. This is how Tolkien treats magic. He just has it that things happen just because, without even actually establishing how. The burning brand just go, hold on. Go get your Fellowship of the Ring. It's book 2, chapter 3, The Ring Goes South. Go get it. Go get your copy of the Fellowship of the Ring. Go read it yourself. You can read that passage all on your own. You can do it over and over and over again. According to the book, the burning brand flames into brilliant light, all on its own. All on its own. Gandalf can actually cast magic without actually having to do anything. But in regards to the whole point of there being 6 different types of magic, why are there 6 different types of magic? What is the difference between a spell and a word of command? Why is it that sometimes when he does a word of command, it requires the use of the staff, but at other times he can use a word of command and it doesn't require his staff? How is it that he used his staff to break the bridge? What magic was that? There is no explanation for anything regarding magic in The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien just throws this stuff out without any rhyme, any reason, and any rules. If Gandalf is a Maya, and the book shows that Gandalf can simply say, "Saruman, your staff is broken," why would Gandalf need any other variation of magic? And it's not like after Gandalf broke Saruman's staff that Gandalf went, okay, hold on, guys. I got to take a break. I'm tired. No, he wasn't even tired after shattering Saruman's staff. So why not just have Gandalf use his Maya magic all the time? Well, because you can't, because then Gandalf can do whatever he wants and his magic is unlimited. But at the same time, Gandalf has learned spells. From where? Who wrote up the spells for Gandalf to even learn in the first place? Because that's not how magic works in The Lord of the Rings. There are no spells and lore. There's not supposed to be words of command. That's not how magic is supposed to work. So who created the words of command for Gandalf to learn? Who created the spells for Gandalf to learn? I don't know. And you can't ask Tolkien because guess what? Well, obviously because he's dead, but you know what I mean. You can't ask Tolkien because guess what? He doesn't know either. That's why it's impossible to pin down how magic works in The Lord of the Rings, because Tolkien just makes it up as he goes along. Like, seriously, what's the difference between using a spell and a word of command? Why can't Gandalf use a word of command to seal the door shut magically? Why does he need a shutting spell? Why does Gandalf need to use a word of command to light the fire? Why not use a fire spell? Why not use your Maya ability to just have it go on fire? But apparently, Tolkien is the greatest fantasy author of all time. I also want to cover the Gandalf versus the Balrog, a whole deal. Because so much of what happens during that makes absolutely no sense. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to use it to dismiss the rest of the works of the books. I want to use it as it is a great example to establish that this is how Tolkien treats the book and the story and the narrative and applies it throughout the book. It's just that the Balrog versus Gandalf scenario encompasses it all in one thing. So the Fellowship is in the Mines of Moria. They're being chased by the orcs. At a certain point, Gandalf tells the other companions, go down the stairs, wait for me for a second. I'm going to go deal with the door to stop the orcs. At that point in time, Gandalf doesn't know about the Balrog yet. So anyway, he does what he does. He goes and they run. He ends up being tired. I got to rest, blah, blah, blah. Gimli asks him what happened. Gandalf says, I was going to try a shutting spell, but there was something on the other side, and what it was, I cannot guess. But I have never felt such a challenge. The counterspell was terrible. It nearly broke me. For an instant, the door left my control and began to open. I had to speak a word of command. Why did you have to speak a word of command? A word of command of what, Gandalf? Did you try to use a word of command to shut the door down? To keep the door shut? Well, if that was the case, why didn't you start off with the word of command? According to you, the shutting spell requires time for it to work properly. But you went up to the door that orcs were banging down. Forget the Balrog. Forget the Balrog. Gandalf went to the door that he knew that the orcs were coming in through, but decided to cast a shutting spell as if the orcs weren't going to be able to break through the door while you're casting the spell. So the shutting spell doesn't work. So what? You used a word of command as a backup to shut the door? What was the word of command, Gandalf? What was it for? But here's the other thing. Okay, so I had to speak a word of command. That proved too great a strain. A too great a strain on what? A too great a strain on you? Because if it established too great a strain on you, that would have just tired you out. Was it too great a strain on the door? Because after that, the door burst in pieces. Why would a word of command to hold the door shut would be too great a strain on the door? So a word of command to hold the door shut was too great a strain on the door, and so it caused the door to explode and the roof to collapse. Any of you Tolkien fanboys want to explain how that works? How that makes any sense whatsoever? It is literally gibberish. It is gibberish. It means nothing. None of that makes sense. Why would Gandalf cast a shutting spell that to be able to work properly requires time, but does it while the orcs are on the other side of the door? Again, forget the Balrog. He doesn't know about the Balrog. There's orcs on the other side of the door, and he's going to try and cast a shutting spell that requires time. That doesn't work, and his fallback is using a word of command. We don't even know what the word of command is. We don't even know what the word of command is. My best guess, because that's all it is a best guess, because apparently Tolkien didn't think it was important to explain that it was a backup a backup spell to hold the door. Well, then why didn't you just do that first, Gandalf? But then the strain of the spell was too great a strain on the door, and so a spell can have too much of a strain on a door and cause it to explode. And this door explodes so violently, it caused the stone roof to collapse. Yeah, okay. Welcome to the brilliance and genius of Tolkien's writing. Anyway, so they are able to get to the bridge. Now, the Fellowship have already crossed the bridge before the Balrog has arrived. Now, Gandalf's plan is to smash the bridge underneath the Balrog so that the Balrog would fall. Now, that plan requires the knowledge that Balrogs can't fly. Because if Gandalf doesn't know that Balrogs can fly, even if he destroys the bridge, if he knows Balrogs can fly, it won't do any good. So Gandalf comes up with that plan because he knows that Balrogs can't fly. So his plan is stop the Balrog from being able to chase us. The plan of action is destroy the bridge so that the Balrog falls and can't chase them. Well, how about this as a plan, Gandalf? Since the plan is to stop the Balrog from chasing you, and you know he can't fly, since you're already on the other side of the bridge, Just use your magic to destroy the bridge. Just destroy the bridge. You destroy the bridge before the Balrog gets to it. The Balrog's stuck on the other side of the chasm. You already know that Balrogs can't fly. So if you trap the Balrog on the other side of the chasm, he can't chase you, neither can the orcs. You're home free. But what does Gandalf do instead? For no reason whatsoever. Actually, there is a reason, but I'll get to that in a minute. Gandalf goes to the middle of the bridge to face the Balrog one-on-one so that Gandalf can have this little speech. Anyway, the bridge breaks, the Balrog falls, and Gandalf falls as well. How Gandalf survives the fall, I don't know, and neither do any of you Tolkien fanboys. But here's the kicker. You don't care. You don't care that it doesn't make any sense. You just accept it anyway, which is pretty much why you accepted the ridiculous broken magic system that is the Lord of the Rings books. Anyway, I digress. So they land. Now, Gandalf's source of light was the staff. The staff is broken. He even says he's in darkness when he fights the Balrog, because when the Balrog hits the water, he turns into slime. Even if Gandalf does survive the fall, does he not drown? Like, how deep is the water that he hits? I don't know, whatever. Again, it's not like Tolkien explains anything. But, so the Balrog now turns to slime and is as strong as a snake. Now, remember, before Gandalf uses the staff to break the bridge, when he sees the Balrog, he goes, "Oh my God, it's a Balrog," I'm paraphrasing. But he also says, "And I am still weary." So, before he even breaks the bridge, Gandalf admits that he's already weary. He then falls, however long, survives the fall, survives the water, and is still strong enough to deal with a Balrog made of slime. They hew and they fight each other. Then the Balrog leaves. Now, Gandalf has no source of light. How does he follow the slime? How does he follow the Balrog? And why would the Balrog escape to the top and out? Just, according to Gandalf, the reason the Balrog was able to escape was because he knew these caverns well. Well, if the Balrog knew these caverns well, just go and hide among the many tunnels and caves that are within Moria. You don't act. Hey, Tolkien. The Balrog didn't have to take the endless stairs to escape. If you had given a reason for the Balrog to take the endless stairs to be able to escape, that would have been different. But the problem is, you didn't give a reason. So there's literally no reason for the Balrog to have gone up the endless stairs to try to escape. No point. None. So in the dark, Gandalf is able to follow the Balrog. Now, I understand that he has to follow the Balrog to be able to escape. But then he fights the Balrog for 2 days. How? How does he fight the Balrog for 2 days? How does he chase him for 8 days? He's bound to a mortal body, which means Gandalf has to not only eat, he has to sleep. So what did he do after a day and a half? Like, let's say he was chasing the Balrog for a day and a half before he was so wiped he had to fall asleep. So he ends up falling asleep for a couple of hours. And then what? Regained the trail the next day? How? So there's no way Gandalf could have possibly have chased the Balrog for 8 days. Which is why Tolkien never explains anything. Tolkien doesn't explain how Gandalf survived the fall. Tolkien doesn't explain how Gandalf was able to chase the Balrog for 8 days. But then he ends up escaping and he gets free, and then he decides to kill the Balrog. First of all, it takes him 2 days to kill the Balrog. How? You can't. How did you use your magic, Gandalf, for 2 days against the Balrog after he had regained his fire? Tolkien goes, I don't care. I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I'm not going to explain it because I can't. There is no way Gandalf could have not only followed the Balrog for 8 days, there's no way Gandalf could have fought the Balrog for 2 days. But whatever. So, the Balrog dies, Gandalf dies. He gets reborn as Gandalf the White. And I'm going, okay, I can understand you are being brought back. Why are you now Gandalf the White? What did you do to get promoted? You killed a Balrog? Okay, why does killing a Balrog elevate you from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White? I hate to say this, but it's like, what? Did killing the Balrog gain you enough experience points to get you up a level? Because that's the closest to an explanation there is. Which of course doesn't make sense because Dungeons and Dragons didn't exist. But there's no other explanation. It's not like Tolkien actually has an explanation for why killing the Balrog allowed Gandalf to become Gandalf the White. It's just that. Now, here's the whole point of why Tolkien had that measure. Oh, before I even get to that, why does Gandalf want to kill the Balrog? The Balrog is harmless. I hate to break it to you, the Balrog provides no threat because the Balrog was trapped in Moria for, I believe, around 5,000 years, and then was accidentally awakened by the dwarves. But from when the Balrog was awoken by the dwarves to when the Fellowship arrives at Moria, 1,000 years have passed. The Balrog is roaming Moria, has been roaming Moria for the last 1,000 years and never left. It's not like the Balrog is rampaging the land and going after elves. He's just staying in Moria. So the Balrog is not a threat in that way. And it's not like Sauron or Saruman were doing anything to try to recruit the Balrog. Now, if Tolkien had established that the reason Gandalf wanted to kill the Balrog was because he feared that Sauron or Saruman would have tried to recruit the Balrog, then that would have been an explanation. A simple line. This is Tolkien, who for most of the book can't shut up. But for some reason, couldn't add a line like when Gandalf is explaining to Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas what happened. Tolkien couldn't have had Gandalf say a line of, I had to kill him because I feared that if I didn't, and the Balrog was left to his own devices, Sauron or Saruman would have recruited them to their side. You don't have a problem shutting up at the other three books, Tolkien. You couldn't have added that line to actually give a reason, because here's the thing, that's not why Tolkien had Gandalf fight and chase the Balrog. The whole point of the whole Gandalf versus Balrog thing was because Tolkien wanted Gandalf the Grey to become Gandalf the White, and didn't know how to do that because Tolkien doesn't have a power structure for the Astari. Tolkien doesn't have a power structure of how the Astari works. Tolkien, who has figured out the various races' language, has established the history of the first 4 ages, has the history of various characters, all that. Hold on, not only that, this is the Unfinished Tales. In the Unfinished Tales, there is a section about the Astari, which talks about their origins, where they came from, who they are, what they did, where they went while they were on Middle-earth. But he wrote a section in the Unfinished Tales about the Astari and didn't even bother trying to establish and figure out what the Astari's how the Astari's power structure works. To even establish how even more ridiculous that is. This is the Return of the King. I just give me a second here. Okay, hold on. Page 361. This is the story. 300 pages. This is the appendices. 100 pages. 100 pages of the appendices. In the appendices, okay? Apparently, Tolkien didn't think it was worth any effort or energy to spend on trying to figure out what the Astari's power structure was and how to actually apply it into the story, but thought the family tree of Durin was important. Not only the family tree of Durin, but the family tree of the Baggins was worth putting effort, energy, and thought into, but not the power structure of the Astari. The family tree of the Tooks, the family tree of the Brandy books, and the family tree of Samwise. The family history of the Hobbits, Tolkien considered worth putting effort, energy, and thought into, but how the Astari power structure worked, not worth it. This is Tolkien's mentality towards magic. He doesn't give a damn. That's why I'm harping on it. This is Tolkien admitting he doesn't care enough about magic to even put any effort into establishing how the Astari power structure works. And because he doesn't have a power structure on how a power structure works, he went, well, I'll have it that the reason Gandalf is able to be promoted to Gandalf the White is he kills a Balrog. That all of the stupid that was necessary, all of the forced storytelling, all of the absolute unexplained ridiculousness that was necessary to go from the Balrog and Gandalf falling to the chasing for 8 days, fighting for 2 days, dying was Tolkien's way of going, since I have no idea how to actually promote Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White, I'm just going to have it that he kills a Balrog, and that's good enough. This is the greatest fantasy author of all time, huh? Yeah. Let's move on, shall we? Now, when you have a practitioner of magic, such as Gandalf, in the story, the problem with such a powerful wizard is that you don't want to have his magic overpower the story and be a solution for all the problems. So what a competent fantasy author will do is find ways of limiting the wizard so that his magic doesn't take over the story. An example would be when Gandalf is dealing with the Balrog and the orcs at the door and is casting the shutting spell and the word of command and dealing with the Balrog's counterspell. After he does that, Gandalf is tired and he's weak. Now, what an incompetent fantasy author would do is ignore the fact that using magic tires out the wizard every other time the wizard uses magic. Because when Gandalf breaks Saruman's staff, he's not tired. When Gandalf the White returns to talk to Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas, he uses the spell to stop them from being able to attack. That doesn't tire him. He's able to fight. Gandalf is able to fight a Balrog for 2 days with fire and lightning, and that doesn't seem to tire him out. A competent fantasy author establishes a limit on a wizard and then actually applies it every time he uses magic. An incompetent fantasy author establishes a limitation but then ignores it whenever he doesn't want to. Another thing a competent fantasy author would do to limit their wizard is have it that every time the wizard casts a spell or uses his magic, it will alert other evil or enemy wizards on where the wizard is. So it would limit our hero, our wizard, in wanting to cast spells so that the enemy wizards don't locate where he is. Such as when Gandalf is on the mountain and does the spell and does the word of command to cast the fire, Gandalf establishes that by doing that, he's alerting everybody to where he is. An incompetent fantasy writer will have it that the wizard will constantly cast spells and not worry about being located and never actually have it be applied in the first place. Tolkien goes, I'm going to give Gandalf a limitation. Every time he uses his spell, there's a chance that, he'll be discovered. But then every other time he uses the spell, every time the other uses magic, he's never worried about being located. And by the way, he never gets located using magic anyway. So it's like, another way a competent fantasy author would limit a wizard's ability to use magic is to have it that the wizard is not allowed to use his magic because it would reveal his true nature. So Gandalf was told that he should not be using his magic in the presence of others because then that will reveal his true nature. What an incompetent fantasy author would do is ignore that rule he just established and have Gandalf cast magic in front of everybody without a problem anyway. Because apparently revealing his true nature is actually irrelevant. I want to end this with what has to be one of my favorite broken lines in regards to magic in the entire Lord of the Rings books. It's when they're at the doors of Durin, and Gandalf tells Pippin, "I once knew every spell in all the tongues of elves or men or orcs that was ever used for such a purpose." Now, the spells he's talking about are not magic spells. They're not talking. This seems to be so misconstrued by people. It's not that he once knew all the magic spells of elves and men and orcs. It's he knew the spells that were used for such a purpose, which was the words of opening. So Gandalf once knew all the spells of words of opening in the tongues of elves, men, and orcs. Since we are dealing with secret doors, and the one race we actually know uses secret doors is dwarves, why wouldn't one of the tongues of spells of opening doors that Gandalf would have learned would have been of the dwarven tongue? He goes, you know what? I can learn orc, I can learn elf, dwarf, men, or elf. You know what? I don't think the dwarven tongue of learning the words of opening spells is important. I'm going to pick orc. Like, why would he bypass the dwarven tongue of opening word spells since they're the ones that use it the most? But here's the other thing. Men and orcs have opening words. Why? I can understand why elves and dwarves have opening words because they can actually create secret doors. And it's not like the elves or the dwarves would create secret doors that could be opened by men or orcs. So the only opening words an orc would know would be for secret doors that were made by orcs. But orcs can't make secret doors. They don't have that access to the magic to be able to make secret doors. So why would orcs have secret words of opening for secret doors they can't make? And how did Gandalf learn them? Because why would there be any to learn? The same thing with men. For men to be able to have words of opening, they would have to be able to create their own secret doors to be able to apply the words of opening for. But they can't create magic doors because they don't have the magic ability. You have the exception, and you have the mouth of Sauron, who is a sorcerer, but that's evil magic. That's not the magic that is necessary to construct and create and enchant magic doors. That's totally different. That's not something men have access to. So why would men have words of opening for secret doors that they can't make? This is Tolkien's total lack of not giving a damn about how magic works. This line should have never existed. This line should have never been written. But because Tolkien doesn't give a damn about magic, doesn't give a damn that he contradicts himself, doesn't give a damn that it doesn't make any sense, is irrelevant to Tolkien because Tolkien is a fantasy author who doesn't give a damn about the magic in his own world building. But here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. To open the doors of Durin doesn't even require opening words. It's the Elvish word for friend. Just say the Elvish word for friend and you can open the door. The doors of Durin don't even require opening words to even open. So then what's the point of opening words? It's just... Anyway, that's the magic system in The Lord of the Rings. And this is the magic system devised by the greatest fantasy author of all time. Anyway, yeah, hopefully this helps you understand why I absolutely am not a fan of the Lord of the Rings books. Again, I've said this before, I still respect the author, I still respect his works, but there is no way that The Lord of the Rings is the greatest fantasy novel of all time, and there is no way Tolkien is the greatest fantasy author of all time. Might I suggest you raise your standards in regards to the fantasy genre? Anyway, that's it for me. I'm out of here. See ya.